In January 2001, the Prime Minister oversees the creation of a special trained armed police unit solely for the purposes of putting out the insurgency or the Maoists. In June 1st, we have a sort of random weird event. The Crown Prince Dipendra kills most of the royal family in a shooting spree, including the king. The reasons of which, are still somewhat mysterious for this day, but most people commonly agree that had nothing to do with political motivation. Princes obviously resembled the sort of cliche Saudi Arabia prince who wants to drive around and sleep with, the women and things like this. And I know this is a cliche, so don't send people after me. But the point is that it was taken that he wanted to marry somebody, but she wasn't a royal blood, and he got pissed and then started shooting people. It ended with a flowered suicide attempt on the part of the prince, who finally succumbed to death 3 days later. King Gyanendra is crowned the king to be the next in line after the king and prince, who was conveniently away, and he's considered conniving, like a sort of Rasputin, like disreputable character, and we'll see why it is that the Nepalese aren't impressed with him in a moment. From August to November, the Maoists agree to the peace talks, but not seeing anything closer to their goals being realized, quit them. The quitting is punctuated by the ransacking of police and army depots in 42 districts, where the Loyalist suffers casualties of 9-1. 3 days later, during the Nepali Congress, the UML's government declares a nationwide emergency and deploys the Royal National Army, which I talked about earlier. Then we have all these democratic reforms. In May 22, King Gyanendra dissolves the parliament under the advice of the Prime Minister and orders new elections. The official reason given for dissolving the parliament is his opposition to the state of emergency, which is apparently how you restore democracy, is by keeping the parliament around. 19 days later, Belgian arms manufacturer FN Herstal delivers 5,500 M249 machine guns, with the Crown decision agreed upon by all the royally recognized parties. The Belgian Foreign Minister Louis Michel claims that the shipment is allowed on a country with pluralistic democracy. Not to be beaten, the U.S. Congress approves $12 million in funds to train the Royal National Army and supplies them with 5,000 Colt M16 rifles, which are still used as the official rifle of the Royal National Army this very day. In May, peace talks degenerate and large-scale conflicts break out over the border of Pittsburgh. We're going to cut this down a little bit. October, King Gyanendra excuses the Prime Minister who recommended dissolving the Parliament and dissolves the rest of the government and cancels the execution elections for the next month. Several days later, the Crown installs a new Loyalist Prime Minister. In August 2003, the military resumes operations against the PLA, killing 39. This is after a peace talks agreement. Maoists then threaten to break the ceasefire unless the agreement includes allowing the Maoists in the new constituent assembly. So the Maoists want to participate in the government, and apparently what it means to have a peace agreement is to not let them participate at all, according to the royalists. The day after, the Maoists inspire a day strike that occurs for 3 days, denouncing the Royal Nepali Army's attack on the Maoist cadre during peace talks. During the strike, Maoists end a ceasefire, proclaiming that there's no reason for them to engage in the peace talks. In 2004, the Royal National Army starts extrajudiciarily executing Maoist activists, which raises even the ire of Amnesty International, which usually never does for communists. April 2nd marks the second biggest rally since Janda Alan. The message is pro-democracy and anti-monarchy. What's significant about this particular event, when strikes are happening all the time, is not only is it the biggest, but it's actually happening in Kathmandu, which is largely controlled and very sympathetic to the Nepal Congress, UML, and the Crown, and this sort of thing. So we start to see some serious inroads being made with the city people. April 3rd, a dozen trucks are burned while waiting for gasoline for Indian suppliers. This would have to speak to the influence that India has on Nepal. On the 16th, Here we go. Yes, on the 16th, Mao started to bomb luxury hotel, bombed the luxury hotel Solti after the hotel refused to close under Mao's advisement. Basically, and I want to highlight this as well so it doesn't seem completely one-sided, that the Maoists, if you were not going to play nice with them and go on strike with them when they wanted to, they were going to start bombing you, and they did. So, it was kind of like, all right, you're either with the democratic forces or you're with the king, and so there were bombs being set off. On September 10th, a bomb explodes in the U.S. Information Office in the Capitol. 3 days later, U.S. Peace Corps and other non-essential U.S. officials are evacuated. And on December 23rd, Mao's forces launched a blockade on the Capitol, and over 15,000 hold a rally suing for peace. On February 1st, 2005, the Crown dissolves the government again and bans all news reports. The army starts to arrest politicians, journalists, unionists, humanitarian workers, civil rights leaders, and cuts all telephone lines and internet connections. This would be because people aren't very amiable towards the Crown at this point, and he didn't want them talking to the rest of the world about that. September of 2005, Maoists declare 3 days of ceasefire with the intention of allowing the other political parties to join up with them. In November, some of them join up in a common front against the ejection of the king. I'm just about finished here. Let's go to May 3rd. All right. So on May 3rd, the Maoists agreed to a 3-month truce with the newly appointed Prime Minister, which is the king appointed Prime Minister. But even so, this new cabinet underneath the Prime Minister basically declares that the Maoists are no longer a terrorist group, which means they get to activate as a real political viable party. This starts the peace procedure, and on the 21st of November, peace talks with the 7 major parties finish. The king is unofficially outed. The king unofficially becomes a republic, and there is a 12-point peace agreement that allows for the voting of the Constituent Assembly to form a new constitution to be completed by March 5th, 2010, which is like less than a week and a half from now, and an integration of the People's Liberation Army with the Royal Nepali Army. April 10th, the election of the first CEA takes place. The CEA takes place. The CPN Maoists win the majority, although not 50%. It's the most amount of seats. Much to the surprise of the rest of the world and political parties. Up until this time, people thought that the Maoists were completely doing their whole propaganda thing, and they were. Let's not say that they're not. But they didn't think it garnered as much influence, and people were just kind of going with the flow, and it was kind of like, oh, I hate the government because that's what everybody does, and things like this. So the UML thought that they were going to capture the cities, and that the peasants were illiterate and were not going to be able to vote, and then the Nepali Congress would claim out second place. Yeah, it turned out the Maoists won this, which is a big threat because basically all the rival political parties were thinking that the Maoists would be completely relegated by democratic elections. And they weren't, and that's when the rest of the world was like, holy crap, what's happening? Are these people communists? So that's what started there. And on May 28th, 2008, the king is officially deposed by the Constituent Assembly, and the Kingdom of Nepal is renamed to the Federal Democratic Republic of Nepal. Now, I should point out here that they have quite they're quite interested in doing the whole democratic thing. This is different from, say, the Maoists or, the sort of Leninist movement where, they want to include people, but if they don't want to be included, screw off, right? And there's rules for the inclusion. These people are allowing, people like the Nepali Congress who supported the royal, the royal family forever to participate in politics. And in fact, they won #2 in the elections of, that would be April 10th.